Well, Kirill Dmitriev is the CEO of the Russian Direct Investment Fund, joining us now from Moscow. Great to see you there. What other countries are lining up for the Russian vaccine that you know of at this point in time? I believe there were some conversations just over the last day with Mexico.
Well, just as actions speak louder than words, so fast registration speak louder than some of the criticism that we've heard. So you mentioned Hungary as a country that registered already. 13 countries registered Sputnik V vaccine, including United Arab Emirates, which is really a big opinion maker in the Middle East, sort of windows to the Middle East. And as you mentioned, it is also based on clinical trials in United Arab Emirates. So we expect imminent approvals in Mexico, in Pakistan, in Paraguay, and those approvals are coming. And all of these approvals are based on phase 3 data. And it's very important to underline that just as Sputnik, Pfizer, and Moderna also have phase 3 trials ongoing, they will also be finished in 2022 and 2023 for those vaccines. So all of this is based on interim data, but regulators review our interim data and approve vaccine because the interim data of phase 3 is stellar.
What do you say to those that have, of course, criticised the rollout, particularly the mass rollout in Russia before those stage 3 trials have concluded?
Well, this is just important to have the facts right, just as I mentioned. So there are no phase 3 trials concluded anywhere in the world. Moderna and Pfizer will finish those in 2022 and 2023. So everybody is just having interim reports, and we have interim report of phase 3, just as Moderna and just as Pfizer, and this is the basis of approvals in all of those markets. So absolutely the same level, and we will have a publication coming hopefully this week already of our results in a top peer-reviewed magazine. So again, all of the data is fully transparent, and this is all based on data, and it wouldn't be possible to get approvals if data of phase 3 trial would not be stellar in all of those 13 countries.
Is Russia targeting any part of the world specifically to roll out the vaccine? Because a lot's been made, and in fact, we got a warning from the World Health Organization about vaccine inequality. What is Russia doing on that front?
Well, we do see that many parts of the region are really underserved with vaccines. So we are working a lot with Latin America, Middle East, Asia, Africa. And it's very important that we are not just saying to countries, let's just buy Sputnik. Sputnik can be just a part of the portfolio of the vaccine that those countries are building. But it is true that many of the rich countries got all of the vaccine supplies for some vaccines. So it's very important there is a balance for all of the countries. And I think Russia and other countries need to work together to restore this balance. And we are doing our part, but we cannot do this on our own. We need partners to work with other countries. And of course, vaccination in Russia is a huge priority. And we are vaccinating Russians as a big priority, but we are also working with other nations to help them and want other vaccine manufacturers to work with us to have equal access to vaccines throughout the world.
Kirill, it's Dan here in Dubai, and I wanted to ask you about what's happening on the ground in Russia right now. President Biden has instructed his Director of National Intelligence to provide an assessment of the Kremlin's role in the poisoning of opposition leader Alexei Navalny. Actually, the State Department was out with a statement just a couple of days ago saying, "We urge Russia to fully cooperate with the international community's investigation into that poisoning and also credibly explain the use of a chemical weapon on its soil." Can you respond to that?
Well, again, we don't want to make vaccine political. I think it's very important that vaccine protects both, opposition people and non-opposition people. We have lots of journalists who were criticizing vaccine before who now took the vaccine and feel very protected. So we don't want to politicize vaccine. I think it's very important that politics stay separately. There is no question that the vast majority of Russians support President Putin's policies. And it's very important to have dialogue with the US, dialogue with other nations. Russia is open to such dialogue. And I think this dialogue is in the interest of the whole world.
And I'm sure you've seen that Navalny's jailing has sparked some of the largest protests that we've seen across Russia and major cities across Russia. Thousands of people taking to the streets. The United States now demanding his release. Are you concerned, Kirill, from your perspective, that this is indeed distracting and the threat of fresh sanctions distracting from the good progress that you have been making on the vaccine execution and rollout?
Well, no, I think vaccine registration and rollout is going very well, and vaccine is delivered successfully to Russian regions. And I would qualify it. I mean, those were clearly not the largest protests, and it's very important that the West gets good information and proper information. So, the number of people in Moscow protests is estimated somewhere between 4,000 people and around 30,000 people. And of course, there are people who are disagreeing with policies, just as there are people disagreeing in the US and Europe. We see lots of COVID protests. And I think government needs to listen to all of the voices and, of course, take them into account. But I think vaccine is really one of the uniting projects, really showing that Russia has great science, really showing that Russia has one of the best vaccines in the world. And we are working to protect our people. And we want politics to be far and beyond vaccines. And this is very important because we need to have unifying forces in the world, not just dividing forces in the world.
Kirill, one of the things that we're seeing now is the potential for a delay in supplies to some of these Western vaccines. The Pfizer vaccine here in the UAE is a case in point. What can you do from the RDIF perspective to ensure that there's no delay when it comes to the rollout of the Sputnik vaccine?
Well, I think we've seen pretty much all of the vaccines announce some of the delays, and I think it's really understandable because there are supply chain issues, and basically you need to have lots of components, and if you have an issue with one of the components, it really delays things, and we see it with Pfizer, with AstraZeneca, with some other vaccines. And I think there may be some delays also, on some of our production as we are increasing capacity as well. We hope not. But we're just mindful of the fact that this is a process that has never been undertaken in the world, where you need to start producing tens and hundreds of millions of vaccines right away. And I think expectations need to be realistic. So we really understand all of the other vaccines production issues. We are sure they will be resolved. And I think the world just needs to understand that what's undertaken now has never been undertaken ever before. And all of the vaccine manufacturers are really doing their best to provide vaccines on time.
At the same time as we're seeing, of course, the rollout of vaccine, we've also had a changing of the guard in the United States. We heard overnight from the Chinese premier calling for multilateralism. How does that kind of rhetoric sit with Russia, and what would an easing of tensions between China and the US that we've seen over the last 4 years mean for Russia?
Yeah, I think multilateralism is a very important point to have balance, and I think we've seen too much division, too much stratification, as some people watch only certain news channels and absolutely correct, believe that they're correct and there is no other viewpoint. So I think multilateralism in terms of countries, in terms of the world, is really the way to go. Russia is open for cooperation with the US. I've been consistent advocate that dialogue is important to understand each other. So we hope that there is dialogue and there is better understanding, because yes, there are some differences, but also lots is really based on misunderstandings that can only be overcome through multilateralism and through dialogue. And we showed great example of this with China, but not only with China, with Saudi Arabia, for example. We had major differences before. In a couple of years, we were able to overcome them and become very good partners. And I think we can do so with any nation in the world. And maybe it's too idealistic, but I think the world is so complicated right now that we need to decomplicate it by building more partnerships.
What about partnership with Germany? We know that there's a new head of the CDU and he could replace Angela Merkel as Chancellor there come later this year. He's had very pro-Russian views. So is there an opinion from Russia on his appointment to this role?
Well, I think if you follow his comments, it's a very balanced position. And, he's very pro-European politician. But of course, we do appreciate that Ms. Merkel reached out and publicly said that she would like to work on Sputnik V registration in Europe. And I think we also can undertake lots of other projects with Europe. Europe historically has been one of the strongest Russian partners. And I think this concept of really working with Russia is important for Europe, is important for small and medium and large business in Europe. And I think we need to have politicians who promote dialogue and cooperation with Russia. And frankly, this would make Russia also more working jointly with the West, which I think is important.
Kirill, unfortunately, we're out of time, so we'll leave it there, but always appreciate the frank conversation. Thanks so much for joining us. That's Kirill Dmitriev from RDIF, live for you in Moscow today.